Hello and welcome to this BehaviourWatch and SchoolPod video demo. In this tutorial, you will learn how to manage your system's users and their access, including adding and removing accounts, sending and resetting login details, as well as the various ways to manage your permissions. So the first thing we do, if we're on the home page to begin with, is move along to the admin button, which is the head and shoulders icon in the top right-hand corner of the page. And on your system, it will be placed next to your logo or the logout button. So if we click on admin, you'll see that the admin page is broken up into multiple different sections and modules. So the section we're interested in is the staff section, which will be the very first section on your admin page, and a couple of the modules in here specifically, which we'll go over one by one. So the first module that we're going to look at is called user logins, and that is located on the first row of the staff section. So we'll click on user logins first of all. And you'll see here, this takes us to a list of all of your active users on the system. That basically means that these are the people who will be able to log in and record information through BehaviourWatch or SchoolPod. So the first thing you'll see here is that the information is presented to you in a series of columns, and it's basically going to give you details such as the individual users' usernames, their last name and first name, their title and gender, the email address that you will have provided to us when we set up your system or that you will be inputting in order for them to receive information from the system, their staff number. Now, if you are using the system as a HR module or you're using us for things, for example, like the single central register, this is not their teacher number. This is just the unique identifying number that the system will attribute to a user in terms of the order they were added to the system. And then you'll see you can also view things like default location, default subject, whether or not they are a deleted user, which we'll look at in more detail shortly. And then different levels of access. And as we scroll across, these will mostly be marked as Y for yes or N for no, regarding whether or not they have permission or access to that specific area. And again, we'll cover these in much more detail in a few moments' time. What we're going to do is we're going to scroll back to the beginning, and I'm going to first of all show you how to add a new user to the system. So there are a couple of ways that you can do this. The first way, and the quickest way, would be to use copy user settings. And that can be located by selecting the action dropdown in the bottom left-hand corner and choosing copy user settings. Now, the first thing you will need to do is select which user you want to copy. So we might want to copy R. Jones's information to a brand new user. So we're going to tick the box next to R. Jones's name. We'll select action, copy user settings, and then it's going to bring up a window for us where we can start inputting just the basic information for our new user. So the first thing you'll do is select their title, and you'll see the drop-down list contains all of the main titles that you would expect to see. Their username. Now, the username is the unique identifier for that staff member across the system. Now, normally that will contain a 3-letter prefix based on your school's name, but because this is a demonstration system, we actually have a 4-letter prefix. So that will normally be the prefix for your system, and what we normally recommend would be first initial and then surname, but it's really up to you as long as it is unique on your system. If it isn't unique, you'll be alerted that that username has already been taken. And then the other details are fairly self-explanatory. They are just your new staff member's first name, their middle name if you want to provide it, but that is not mandatory, their last name, and then their email address that you wish for them to receive any information from the system to. Once you've done that, you will click Create, and it will add your new user to the system. And it will basically copy over all of the information that is attributed to the previous user to the new person, except for their gender, which you will have to add separately, which I'll show you how to do in a moment. Now, one thing to bear in mind when you are copying a user based on an existing person is that it's not just their permissions that get copied over. So if you have specified the previous user, so the existing user, as being a form tutor or the head of a year group, or you might have added them to some of the groups on the system, which we'll look at shortly, or if you set up any automatic alerts for them, for example, those kind of things are also going to be transferred across to the new user. So you might want to then go back through to those areas and just make a few tweaks if they are not relevant to the new person you're adding. This is the quickest way to do it if it's things like the monitor access and the home access are going to be the same. The other way to add a new user to the system is just to click the Add button in the bottom right-hand corner. If you click this, that will take you to the wider Add User screen, which is a lot more in depth because here you're not copying a lot of the information from an existing person, you're starting from scratch. So you'll see along the top here, we have all of the same information we just saw with copy user settings, plus a couple of extra options. So we've got the space to input the username, we've got the title area, we've got first name, middle name, last name, and then we have email. But we also have the option to add a password and then to retype that password. This can be anything as long as it's something you remember basically, but what we'll look at is how to reset passwords en masse and for individuals if you ever need to do so, and we'll do that very, very shortly. Staff number you'll see is grayed out. Again, that's, as I mentioned earlier, just a unique number for the staff member on the system, so you know chronologically when they were added. And then you have your gender option as well. Now, if I just very briefly cancel out of this screen, if we have added a user via copy user settings, as I mentioned, it doesn't copy over gender. All you would need to do is double click on the user that you've added, and then that will take you into the edit screen, and you would just assign their gender there. So if we come back to add again, so once you've filled in the basic details, so who is this person, you've then got the option to specify details such as role. So if they are the form tutor of a class on your system, then you can select which form group they are the tutor of. So our new person might be the form tutor of 10A. You can also specify which year group they are the head of, if they are indeed a head of year, and similar with department, and then whether or not they are a member of SLT. Below that, you have the home defaults. So when they first log into the system, and every time they log into the system, you can set which tab is their default home tab, so the one they're taken to initially. So for most systems, this might be the dashboard. And if you scroll down towards the bottom, you've got all of the default tabs there ready for you, including said dashboard. But if you've set up custom slips on the system, so these might be your behavior slips, they might be accidents and injuries or contact logs, you can also set those to be a staff member's homepage as well. So say, for example, if you've got a member of the administration team who would by and large be using the system to log contact information, so a parent calling in, for example, you can set that contact log to be their homepage, so that's just where they're taken to instantly every single time they log in, and they don't have to click between tabs to get there. Default reports tab is very similarly, so we obviously have a number of different types of reports on the system that you can access. This will just define which is the first tab you'll be taken to when you go to the overall reports area. And then default subject and default location are predominantly used for when you're filling in things like incidents on the slip. So when you load up a brand new record to fill in, it will pre-populate the subject and location of the staff member based on the defaults you've input here. Below that, we have the attendance default. Below that are the attendance defaults. The only one that you're really interested in looking at the moment is the always show attendance codes tick box. That will change how your attendance information is displayed in home attendance to the user that you're adding. So by default, this is unticked, which means if a user were to go to home attendance, they wouldn't actually see the letter or the code of the DFE attendance code that they are inputting. It will just show either a green box, a red box, a purple box, or a yellow box, depending on the type of code they'd entered. So being present, authorized absent, unauthorized absent, or late. If you were to show the attendance codes, all that's going to do is just show things like an L code, // as well. The default attendance status you don't need to worry about because that is a hangover from a previous version of the attendance module. Below that, we have the slip access. This is what you can use to further restrict your users' permissions to the system, basically. And you can do all of this en masse later on, which I'll show you how to do. But if you want to do it for an individual through user logins, you can absolutely do so. So you can specify that this particular user can either only view existing slips that were created by themselves, on the student profile. So you can set up the student profile to have specific tabs displaying there as well. So if you wanted your incident slip to show in a student's profile, you can do so, and this will allow you to restrict what staff members can see on the student profile as well as through the home area. Access my form slips only. So if you've specified them as being a form tutor up in the roles section up here, that will basically allow you to say that they can see any slip created by any member of staff as long as it's for a child in their form group. And then similarly, on the right-hand side of those options, you've got the option to restrict them to only be able to view slips from certain locations, buildings, or sites, depending on how your system has been set up. So for home access, this is allowing you to specify what areas of the home screen this member of staff can see. So we've got obvious things like they're able to view the dashboard or the attendance module, or any of the other modules that we set up within the system for you. But you do have a couple of extra options in there that aren't immediately obvious. So the first one is whether or not this member of staff can access the admin area. Now bear in mind, if somebody can access the admin area, then that means they can do everything that you're able to do through this tutorial, including adding and removing users and changing permissions. So we normally recommend you keep your list of admin users to a minimum, just so you know exactly who is going in and is able to change that kind of information. But it's as easy as just ticking that box and then clicking save in the bottom right hand corner when you're happy. The other option is the ability to edit attendance reports. So just going back to the report side of things very briefly, we do have a whole section of the system dedicated to reporting on your attendance information. And through a few of those reports, you are actually able to edit the information you've already input through home attendance directly within them. This tick box here basically controls whether or not this member of staff can edit the attendance data directly through a report or not. So that would be completely up to you whether or not you are happy with staff members being able to edit attendance data whilst they are also reporting on that data. And then we have a couple of extra options, so accessing the trust reports if your school is part of a wider trust, and then things like the mark book stage assessment entry as well. And then below that, monitor access, very similar to home access, except it's looking at the monitor area along the top here. That is basically just saying, can they access the different areas of monitor? So once you've filled this in, you can just click save, and then similarly with copy user settings, that's going to add that new member of staff to the system for you. So we've added our members of staff. Now what we want to do is to be able to send out username reminders to them so they know what their usernames are, either initially or if they've forgotten them, and reset their passwords so we can set everybody up with a temporary default password to get them logged into the system, again, either for the first time or because they've forgotten their password. The way we do that is again through our action dropdown. So we would tick the members of staff that we want to make these changes for, click action, and then you can choose forgot username. When you select that, what it will do is it will send an email to the member or members of staff that you've selected containing just their username for the system. The email will go to the address that you've provided within this column here as well. You can also reset password, and if you tick that box, it will bring up a little window for you to enter a temporary default password. Now, for security purposes, we don't store passwords in a way that is retrievable. So once you have set someone up with a new password, you will have to pass it to them either through your own internal email or through word of mouth. This password will just be a temporary default password. Once you have provided the staff member with that password and they log in for the first time using it, they will be prompted to change it to something more secure before they can proceed with the use of the system. The only other thing they will need to log into the system is the PIN, and you will have been provided that by either your implementer or your support representative, and it will be the same for every member of staff on the system. The other thing you're able to do through the action dropdown is delete a staff member. So if somebody has left you, what you can do is tick the box next to their name, go to action, and choose delete/undelete. What that will do is that will delete that staff member from the system, but it will be a soft delete. Now, what I mean by that is that they will no longer be able to log into the system and you won't be able to fill in anything new for them accidentally, but anything they've previously filled in, so any slips, or if you're using SchoolPod, any of the information on their individual profile for the purposes of your single central register, that will all be retained. So you will still have access to that information and you will still be able to report on it. If you need to review deleted staff members' information within user logins, or if you need to reinstate a staff member, say somebody has left and rejoined you, you can click the Show Deleted button. What that will do is bring up a list of all of your deleted staff members as well for you. And it'll look exactly the same as the list you can see in front of you at the moment, except your deleted staff members will be highlighted in orange, and you'll just tick the box next to their name if you want to reinstate them, and choose Action, Delete/Undelete, and it will just work in reverse and it will bring them back on roll for you. One thing to remember if you are undeleting a staff member is at the point of deletion, their password is scrambled, so you will just need to remember to reset their password for them once you've re-added them to the system. But other than that, it's as easy as that. So, the next thing you can do through the action area is the ability to set an individual staff member's slip access. So again, if we're still in action, we just choose Set the Slip Access for Users, and it will just bring up a window for you where you can literally just tick which slips you want this member of staff to be able to access. And once you've done that, you just click Save, and then that is set for you. I will show you very shortly a way that you could do that en masse as well. The only other thing within Action to really take note of is the ability to set that default home tab for multiple users at once. So as we were talking earlier about being able to set up a contact log, for example, as the default home tab for your administrative staff, if you wanted to, you could tick the names of all of your administrative staff in one go, and then choose Set the Default Home tab and choose it for everybody in one go. The other things to bear in mind with the user logins area are the audit option. And what that will allow you to do is if you select audit, it will show you by default for the current day who has logged in and at what times they have logged into the system. You can also change that to any time frame you would like to see as well. And you do have your filters too. So if you wanted to just keep track of when a particular member of staff was logging in, you can do that by clicking filter and then choosing which staff member specifically you're interested in looking at. And then the other option is the change log. That's basically just an audit trail. So if you were to tick a staff member and click change log, that will bring up a little window for you where you can view what details within the user logins area have been changed for that staff member over time as well. And that is user logins. What we'll look at now is if we click back, is once you've set up your users, how you can then manage their permissions and access further. So the first place we'll go to do that is the Groups button, which is right next to the User Logins button. So we'll click on Groups, and you'll see here we've got a list of groups that we've preset onto the system. So on your system, these will probably be blank initially, unless you've already set some up for yourself. You can always add more groups by clicking Add in the bottom right, and it's as easy as giving your group a name. So we could add a group called SLT and Behavior. Save that, and there we go, our new group has been added for us. And you can see here we've got 0 members of the group at the moment because we haven't defined that membership. So the way to do that is either to click the group that you want to change the membership for and select membership, or you can just double click on the group and it will do exactly the same thing for you. In terms of specifying who a member of the group is, all you need to do is tick the names that are appropriate to that group, click save, and then you're done. You've defined your group membership. You can set up as many groups as you need to cover all of the different types of permission that you would like to set. Groups are really useful because you can use them on things like the message board as well. So when you're sending and receiving messages to and from one another, you can send them to whole groups of people as well. So you might want to set up some groups for the purposes of the message board as well as for permissions, for example. The other thing you can do with groups is you can set up limited admin access. So you can see here we've got a group called SLT. Now, it might be the case that not all members of SLT need full admin access to the system. They might only need to be able to do 1 or 2 bits within admin. Say, for example, set up automatic alerts or real-time notifications. But we don't want them to be able to set up new users and change permissions otherwise. What we can do is we can select that group, choose Access, and that will take you to a screen which has a tick box for every single individual module within the admin page. And they are ordered based on sections, so it is fairly easy to find the item you're looking for. Of course, you can always click on the column headers to order them alphabetically if that's even easier for you to work with. So we might want to say SLT can set up real-time notifications for staff members. So we'll just scroll down this list until we get to our R's, select real-time notifications, click Save, and what we've basically told the system now is that anybody who is a member of that SLT group will be able to see this admin button, they'll be able to click onto it, but when they go to the admin area, every single button is going to be grayed out apart from that real-time notifications module. So that way you can kind of share the load of admin responsibility amongst your other staff members without having to worry about them being able to amend permissions. One thing to bear in mind though is that limited admin access is still admin access. What do I mean by that? So what I mean is that if you are a limited admin access user, you will still be able to do some of the things that admin users generally can do, including deleting messages from the message board, deleting slips, and also if your timetable is set up so that only admin users can amend the timetable, limited admin users are included in that. So just bear that in mind. It's still something you should apply very sparingly to your system. So the only other option that you've got within here that is not self-explanatory is, if we click on the clock symbol down here, is group history. And if you click on that, that's basically going to give you an audit of how that group has changed over time in terms of membership and in terms of name of the group. So then what we're going to do, now we've set up our groups and we've set up our users. So we've set up our user logins, we've set up our groups. What next? Next up, we have the two data access modules, which are located directly below user logins and groups, called Staff Data Access and Student Data Access. If you can use one, you can use the other because they're pretty much identical in layout. So if we go to Staff Data Access, this is going to show you all of the different sections within the staff area and the individual tabs within a single staff member's profile. So you can see here the overall staff area being things like the staff members themselves, the DBS records, your single central register, and then the individual staff information being their core details, emergency contacts, salary and contract information, and so forth. This page is really easy to set up once you've set up your groups. All you need to do is say, for example, absence records. We don't want every member of staff to be able to go in and see them, so we're just going to select that drop down and specify that only SLT can view absence records. If you're not in that group, that tab will be invisible if you were to go to the staff area to you. Similarly, with the staff menu tabs access, if we don't want all members of staff to see the single central register, you can just specify your group in there as well. And you'll just work your way through these drop downs until you're happy that you've got the right mixture of people seeing the right mixture of information. Once you've done that, click save, and then that's set up for you as well. So if we were to click back and go to the student data access section, this is pretty much identical, so it's just breaking down who can see what using drop downs. The only kind of extra options to be aware of is at the top here, you've got a series of tick boxes. Those are all of your groups on the system once again, but this is basically saying that any member of staff within a group that you tick within that section can view the student profile, but they can't change anything on it. So it just stops members of staff from being able to accidentally edit parent details, for example. And then student photo flash, if you have student photos set up on the system, there are various areas of the system where you can hover over that photo to get a small flash frame which will display some key information about that pupil. And this will basically allow you to define who can see what information within that flash frame again. So those are your data accesses. They're very straightforward to set up. You've done most of the legwork already just by doing user logins and groups. Similarly, roles. This is kind of an extension of your user logins for the most part. So as we looked at in user logins, you can define who your form tutors are, who your heads of year are, your heads of department. You can do that en masse through the roles area. So I won't go through each of these screens because they all work on very similar principles. We'll just look at setup form tutors for the time being. So if we click on setup form tutors, you'll get a screen with a single row for each of your form groups, and you can specify which members of staff are the tutors for those form groups. So for 12B, at the moment, we don't have anybody assigned, and you can see at a glance which forms have someone assigned by whether or not they're marked in blue or whether or not they're marked as a white row. So we'll say that D. Cresswell is our 12B form tutor, but he might not be the only form tutor. There might be another form tutor or teaching assistant that is also assigned to that form, so you can click the green plus to add somebody else. If at the start of a new academic year you don't want to go through and reset all of these options, you can just clear all, click OK, and then what that's going to do is just set everybody back to not set for you. You don't have to go through and reset all of these items. You can just work from the first column, and if it is only a case of there being just one form tutor this year, when you've set your first column and click save, it will remove all these extra drop downs for you automatically. And then just at a glance, if we were to look at Setup Head of Year, you'll see it's the same deal. And similarly with Department. And for SLT memberships. And then you have the option to set up custom job roles as well. This ties into your staff members' profiles. So if you're setting up a contract role, when you're setting up your salary and contract information, you might know your role as something a little different to what the DFE knows it as. So you've got the option to add your own custom name for that role, but you will still need to map it to a DFE role. So we're almost done with setting up your users and permissions on the system now. So the last thing really to look at would be to look at the Manage Slip Access for your system. And this is what I was talking about earlier about being able to define who can access what slip information en masse. So the way it works this time is you would select the element drop-down in the top left-hand corner, choose which slip you want to change the access for, and then you'll get a list of all of your users that you've set up in user logins, and you will just tick or untick their names depending on who you want to be able to see that slip. So we might say that D. Cresswell no longer needs to see safeguarding, but C. Hendelman does. So then we'd click Save. It'll apply those changes for us, and then you can see there it's done. So once you've seen that screen and you've okayed it, you're then safe to move on to the next tab as well. And it's not just slips that you can do that for in here. So as you scroll down, you can do it for the different modules of the home and monitor areas. You can do it for the My Slips Only and My Form Slips Only options you have, including the Show Attendance codes and the Edit Attendance Reports options. And then for the different types of report that we have available on the system as well. And it's as easy as that. And that's really all there is to managing your user logins and your access in BehaviourWatch and SchoolPod. If you have any further questions that haven't been covered in this video or that you can't find the answer to on our help pages, please feel free to call your implementation or support representative or drop them an email, and they'll be more than happy to go through with you in a bit more detail anything you'd like some further clarification on.